As AI continues to infiltrate our everyday lives, we really ought to consider how it's affecting our mental health, which is something that maybe people don't actually think about that often, right? I don't actually think about that often, but now I want to, which is why I'm making this video. And most people really just reduce AI to like an academic assistant, but few consider the actual mental health implications of even that little usage of AI. Even if you're not chatting with AI about your personal life, I found that it can actually still affect how you feel in general. And we're going to talk about that today. This goes beyond simply getting lazy with schoolwork. So let's begin. We're going to start big, right? So the first thing I found is a study by Ostergaard, which features a psychiatrist expressing some concern that AI can induce psychosis in those who are already prone to it. So they reported that this has happened before with people talking to others on the internet. And since AI is quite similar to talking to a real online person, then people can get that false perception that they're discussing with a real person. And this apparently happens even if they know that the AI is not a real human, which is mostly because we don't actually know how AI works. So it's kind of hard to fully reduce it to just lines of code, right? You start to develop a sense of personality for it, which becomes a problem. They also describe reports of people falling in love with AI or building hatred for it, though, as most people, I have not yet heard of these experiences from the people around me, but the fact that it's happening is definitely alarming. And so they go on to describe 5 major types of delusions that people can enter as a result of using AI chatbots like ChatGPT, right? And of course, this is if you're discussing personal issues with it. But anyway, there are delusions of persecution, which is where people think that the chatbot is spying on them and that they need to get rid of it from their computer, which is obviously challenging if you already have a built-in AI into your computer, right? There's delusions of reference, which is where people think that the chatbot is only speaking to them personally and is not speaking the same way to other people. And this makes people think that they have some sort of unique personal connection to the chatbot, which can be a problem. There is thought broadcasting, which is where people think that the chatbot is transmitting the user's own thoughts to other people when they use the chatbot. And this probably comes from people thinking about, oh, the AI is being trained on me, so it's going to tell everyone else everything I know, right? There are delusions of grandeur, which is where people think that they've developed some great idea or invention that no one in history has ever accomplished before. And I'm not guilty of this myself necessarily, but there are some times where you think, oh, AI comes up with something clever, but in reality, it's just something that someone else has already come up with. And lastly, there are delusions of guilt, where people think that they're somehow ruining the chatbot with their poor or unintelligent questions. And then the study then also advises doctors and clinicians to be aware of these potential delusions coming from people who interact with AI chatbots regularly. Now, if you're anything like me, you're probably thinking that these things rarely happen, and if they did, it would probably be to very vulnerable people, and it wouldn't matter for the average person. But the cases the study refers to are actually pretty serious. There is a case of a 26-year-old woman who had no prior history of psychosis, developed psychosis as a result of interacting with GPT-4o. She came to believe that she had somehow resurrected her deceased brother via ChatGPT, and apparently the chatbot was somehow reinforcing this idea, which is a problem I'll talk about later. So it is clearly risky to get too indulged in AI and interact with it as if it were a real person. And I focus on this. I personally limit my AI usage to academic things only, which I'll also discuss the risks of later, because it's not perfect, but I'm glad I don't use it for personal topics anymore because we really don't know why it's writing what it is, right? We don't know what its moral framework is. We don't know why it's thinking the way it is. It's still a black box. Now, more generally, how does AI affect our mental health? If we're talking to it on a daily basis, what are the general implications of that for our mental health, right? So a Stanford University study and a Brown University study found that AI, no surprise, inappropriately affirms delusions and depressive thoughts, which is not necessarily something that we would run, right? It may seem nice sometimes, and I'm sure many of you have noticed this, that ChatGPT tends to just agree with what we say and tell us what we want to hear. But when we start having harmful thoughts, that's really not a good thing. I mean, when was the last time ChatGPT actually disagreed with your thoughts and was critically thinking about what you said? And this is aside from academic or factual information where it actually, tries to tell you that you're wrong. But in reality, when you're discussing personal matters, it doesn't disagree with you and it always reaffirms your thoughts. And that's definitely a red flag. Of course, there's no causal relationship yet between AI and poor mental health, which means there's probably a lot of other things going on in these people's lives that affect this. But this is still alarming. I would still heed this as a warning to avoid using AI to discuss personal matters. You should instead talk about these things with someone you love and trust, and not with AI, because I don't think we can trust it yet. Now, lastly, this is the part of AI that's mostly relevant to us. And does AI affect mental health if we're only using it for academic reasons, right? If you're only using it for school or to do your lab report, right, are you going to experience troubles because of that? Now, as I've said before, over-reliance on AI leads to cognitive offloading, okay? So your brain is literally giving all of the thinking power to the AI, and as a result, it does less and less on its own, right? And EEG studies of the actual brain waves have found that the brain is functionally less active in those who use AI versus those who don't, right? It's not just a feeling. Your brain is literally less active. And this has long-term impacts on laziness. Those who rely on AI become generally lazier later on. And in many cases, this is called cognitive debt, right? Which means when you use AI, you take out a loan for convenience in the short term, but you pay with your motivation in the long term, which, if you're not aware of that trade-off, it can be problematic. It also makes you feel more bored later when you're doing similar things, and it makes you lose motivation in general. So relying on AI can paradoxically make your schoolwork more difficult than before because you feel less motivated and are lazier and don't feel like doing it. And to be honest, this result is a little troubling, right? So many people rely on AI for their everyday academic tasks, yet not many people realize that it is actually making them lose motivation, drive, and desire to even do anything at all. And if our future generation of students has no motivation or drive, then what will become of them? Of course, more studies on AI are needed to confirm these findings and generalize to the general population, but this is pretty alarming in my opinion. AI is fundamentally altering our brain activity. And I think that's a sign that over-reliance isn't really helping us out, and it's actually doing potentially more harm than good. And what I try to do, as I've said before, is to use AI as a supporting tool and not a means to an end. Try to ask AI as few questions as possible, and try to only ask it for specific clarifying facts or to point you in the right direction, but not to give you direct examples. I've even found that when I ask AI to write for me, I subconsciously start writing like the AI, even when I'm not using it, right? I start sounding like a robot. Don't fall into this trap. Have AI guide you, but be in control of your own life and your own brain. And as always, stay mindful, and I'll see you all in the next episode.